All right, happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome back to our live NoCodeOps Live Community Show. If this is your first time here, we are an international community for people, professional people working in operations and leveraging no-code tools to scale up in their career. Every Thursday, or at least we try to do them every Thursday, we come together here with the community and with influential speakers from the no-code space to come and teach the community and just to let you know all about, all the different tools in the no-code realm, but as well as getting you equipped with all the new skills that you might need. So today in particular, we're going to be talking about a tool that I absolutely adore. It was love at first sight. I love it very much. And so I had to get them in. I wanted for you all to see and kind of tell me what you think about it. So without further ado, I am here today with the co-founder at Toddle, Andreas Møller. So hi, Andreas.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Just as I was saying, I absolutely love Toddle from the first time that I saw it. And so thank you so much for giving me this as well. I hope I'm representing the team as much as as well as I could. And
Absolutely.
and before we get started, so today you're going to give us a quick demo on Toddle and how to. We're going to tackle a specific use case. But before we get to the practical side of things, obviously I'm just going to say hi to the people in the audience. Let me know where you're joining us from. I can see Tyler in the chat. Hi, Tyler. Great to have you here. But would you like to tell us a little bit more about you? Like, who's Andreas? How did you get into no code, and where did Toddle come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been a software engineer for quite a long time. I think I've been programming for a little over 20 years now. And always with the focus of web applications. I kind of love the web from an early stage. I especially like that you can just build an app, you can publish it, and it's live. You don't have to go through install, process, app stores, anything. You can just make something and it's ready right now. Yeah, for most of my career, I've been building web applications. In the last couple of years, I've been more doing management than actually coding, but always having my hands in building something. And Toddle really came from this sort of feeling that when you work in a software team, designers kind of get to have all the cool tools. Like they'll get to work in Figma and build their interactive prototypes by dragging things around, and then they go over to us as developers and saying, here, can you just rebuild that exact same thing from scratch but in code? And it always kind of felt a little bit pointless, but you just build it. Why do we have to do everything twice, right? So I wanted to figure out if I could develop a tool where you could build the kind of application that I was used to building, that I built throughout my career. And so this is SaaS applications for anything from startups, scale-ups, up to enterprise size applications. And there's a lot of different things you have to worry about once you start scaling your application in terms of complexity. How do you work at the same time when you're a team of 5 or 10 or 20 people? So there's a lot of different aspects of this that you sort of have to work out. And I sort of got cracking and see, can I figure out how this should work? How do we bring everything from the code world that works into no code? And how do we sort of try and adopt or reinvent the things that won't work, right? And I had a look at a lot of tools. There's obviously, at the time, there was nowhere near as many tools out there as there are now.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a look at what's there, and there was at the time a lot of tools that was great for getting apps up and running quickly, right? So you could kind of get started really quickly. You could build something very impressive really quickly. But once you got to a certain size, whether that was either team size or whether that was the size of your application in pure complexity, or even sort of the scale of data and access, the different platforms wasn't quite ready for the world that I was coming from. So I was looking at how can we build tools that are minded for developers, but even though those developers often weren't developers when they, in our case, aren't developers when they join Toddle, so it's very much minded for the professional segment.
Right. And I like the fact that you're keeping it web-based as well. And it's, as you were saying, like let's centralize all the operations that we're doing, like whether it's design, development, or planning for it. And one of the things that I loved the most about Toddle was, in fact, the interface that I was chatting to you earlier on. I was like, oh, it just really reminded me of kind of Webflow, and to me that felt very familiar. I found it really intuitive, and I was hooked from day one. And also, I particularly like the way your APIs are kind of so easy to integrate with the tool. But enough of me fangirling about Toddle. I'm gonna let you show us all how it works. So, what kind of use case are we gonna show today?
So today we're gonna build a quick application. So Toddle is only for building the front end part of applications, and we chose that very specifically because, again, as you get into the more advanced use cases, every app starts to be a bit different. You might have different data requirements. You might use one service here, another somewhere else. So we're really focused on how we interact with everything in the no-code space. How we connect to everything, but we're not trying to do everything ourselves, right? So today we are gonna use Make. I think people probably know Make. It's one of the more well-known systems. So this is actually our Make setup. This is all the scenarios we're running on Make. We're gonna go create a new one. And the app we're gonna do today, we're actually gonna build a component in Toddle that will fetch any sort of Toddle community events from our Discord server that we've registered there, and then display them, and you can display them on a website.
That's interesting. That's something that I could use as well. As you know, I'm a big Discord user.
A Discord is great. Make is again quite a fantastic tool we use for quite a lot of our setup, and it's quite easy to use. So we need to call this information. We need to fetch this information from Make. So we're going to need to create a webhook, which is how we're going to connect to it. We got it here, custom webhook, and we are going to call it Toddle events. Okay.
Yeah, Tyler is saying in the chat. I was just going to say that sounds right up Claudia's alley. Yeah, absolutely. You can tell Tyler the link between me and Toddle is very strong.
So I'm just gonna copy the address, open up a new tab, and paste that in because it may kind of likes when you get a response up and going. And so the first thing we want to do here is we want to go and add a Discord module. I already set this up to work with Discord. We've got a ton of different integrations running already. And then we can basically say list guild events. And that's going to go to our Discord server through that bot we've integrated with, fetch all the event that are available in Discord, and fetch them into Make. Make has a way of sort of, the way it works around iteration means whenever you fetch a list of something, it generally triggers multiple times after that, and we don't really want that. So we're going to use their flow controls. Oops. And here an array aggregator, and we can just say Discord. If you are not so familiar with Make, and this is a more advanced use case, I'm not going to cover any of that in detail because it's not really but I mean, they have a lot of tutorials on how to do that, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, we're going to do a webhook response, and we're just going to add this array to the body, right? So the basic idea here is when we call the webhook, it's going to go and fetch the events from Discord, make sure to organize them into an array, and then send them back in a response. So let's go and say, which one is not set up? Okay.
Just checking with people in the audience as well. Like, let us know if we're going too fast, or if you have any questions. We have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, but if anything comes up, drop them in the chat and I'll keep them for later.
And so here, I'm just going to use that same webhook again, call it, and now we're getting a ton of JSON data out that is all jumbled up, which is fine because Toddle will take care of that when we need it inside of Toddle. But the point is we've got this webhook that we can use. So now we'll get to the actual main part. building our component here in Toddle. I've already set it up on a new project. This is a component called Toddle Events. So components in Toddle are kind of like a page, but you can embed, you can sort of nest them. So you can put a component inside a page. You can have multiple different components at the same time. So a component kind of owns a little bit of the interface and is in control of that. And they're kind of like mini applications on their own. And it's one of the things that makes Toddle quite powerful. You can combine them in ways that means you can build something that in itself is relatively simple, but when you combine it with a ton of other components, all of a sudden you get a very powerful setup. Right? So the first thing I'm going to do is go and create an API, and I'm going to call it events. And here at the URL, I'm just going to paste in my webhook. Now, unfortunately, under normal circumstances, this should automatically fetch that data. Right now, the provider we're running on, Cloudflare, is having an outage, and some of the services affected is some of the stuff we use to power our editor. So there's a few things that are not currently working until they get that down. It's not a big deal for this bit, but normally you would just get the data right away to be able to access with. We need to do a little bit of a cheat step. So I'm going to go in here and say, when I select this heading 1, and say, when I click that, I would like you to call events. So it basically means when I click this right now, if we look at events, we can see on the left, there's no data coming, and it's not even trying to fetch it. And then if we go into test mode and click our title, now when we go back and look at the events, we get accepted because we have not turned our integration on. That's okay. Delete all data. Right. Yes.
Right. Just to recap the steps. What's going on, Andreas?
So I've built my workflow here in Make that involved creating a webhook. So that's a URL I can call. When I call that in Make, it's going to go and fetch our event list from our Discord server, and then it's going to return them through this webhook. So as we saw here, right? Whenever we call this, we get all this data back. And this data is now sort of unformatted, but Toddle is going to take care of that for us. Inside our Toddle application, I created a new API, which is essentially calling the data from Make. And then I hooked it up so that when I click this heading 1, which is a super weird behavior we're only doing because Cloudflare is currently taken down part of our system. When I click this here in test mode, then I can interact with my application, and I can click this, and then I can go look at the events, and scenario failed to complete. Right, let's have a look. I'm being rate limited. Right. So
are you sure
it's
you're
asking
18?
me to I'm not sure, Mighty. Let's see that one and see if it works again. Right, here we go. We can't click too often. Then Discord gets very angry with us.
Oh yeah, it keeps asking me if I'm a robot. Every time I log into Discord, it's like, are you a robot? So no, I have very fast fingers.
Yeah. But anyway, so now we've got our API set up, and it fetched data from our Make scenario, right? So I don't know, most people see Make as something where you can connect multiple different systems together in part of automation, and it is. But you can also actually use it to build a backend where you literally request data from it and returns it. And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? And we can sort of see this data is the same one we saw in the browser a second ago, but it's now been organized a little bit. So we can see we've got our data here, it says, and inside the response we get back from our server. And it's got a name, build and ship your web app faster than ever before. It's got some creators here for who created them in here. We've got a description, etc. And we got actually another one. So we get this data back from the API now, and it's available to our for our application. So now I'm going to start constructing some UI using that data to power the UI. Right? The first thing I want to do is add a new element, and I'm going to add a list. And I'm going to delete 2 of these default items. So a list in HTML is called a UL and has what's called which is an unordered list, and I have a LI list item inside. We've chosen specifically to stay with HTML for naming of these things, because for a lot of things like accessibility and SEO, it's actually quite important to understand what the HTML is. And it's also probably the simplest part of web development to learn. So we also explain what all this is inside our UI. But if you've never seen it before, that's why the names aren't necessarily the most intuitive. But it actually means that once you're learning Toddle, you're also learning HTML. So it's knowledge you can bring on to what other things you're doing, right?
That's great. And so when you say that people can see that in the UI, where is that?
Not in the UI, it'll be in the browser, with the HTML that's sent to the browser. So if you're using a screen reader or assistive technologies, it looks for these kind of tags and knows how to handle them, right? So for example, when I'm using a heading 1 here, that screen reader knows that this whole page is about something called Toddle events. So someone who is hard of seeing will actually still be able to interact with this. Right, cool. And I can go and say, and this is without me adding any extra functionality to it, right? Just because we're using the proper HTML elements, we actually get all this for free, right? So inside my list item here, I want one list item for every event that I have in Discord. And so every event I get back from calling this API, right? So I can do what's called a repeat. And when I repeat this element, I'm basically saying, here's a list of items. Please create one element for each item, right? And the list of item I can fetch like this. So this is what we call our formula editor. So this allows us to use data available in Toddle, in the component you're in, as a way of either showing text or, in this case, getting the list of items we repeat. So I can go here and I have access to my events API, and I can pick data from in there. And now we can see data is the list item. And we can also see up here that now we have 2 of them, because I have 2 events coming back from my API. Now I can add, let's add inside here we'll add a paragraph. I'll just delete this text element. So P is a paragraph. That's just a block of text. And inside this, the text, I can select that, and I can again use a formula to display that, because obviously for each event, and depending on what events are on Discord, this is going to say something different, right? So I need to have that text coming out of the API. And because I used repeat now, and I'm inside this item, this is sort of a child, I now have access to this thing called a repeat item. So in this case, if I use that repeat item and then pick the property name, and all this data is what was coming back from the API. So if you use the name, now it's going to show in that paragraph the name of the event that came back from the server.
So does it get fed live? So if you create a new event, like after you build this and you create a new event on Discord, it automatically updates the website or the front end?
If you refetch like if you reload the website, it'll automatically fetch the latest data.
The latest one.
If you want it, yeah. If you for some, let's say you're using this for TV monitor somewhere standing in the background, you can set this up to actually add an interval, go and check if there's any updates, and then it'll automatically refetch. So you can say every 5 seconds, please check if there's any new data.
And how do you do that?
For this case,
you have a formula, or?
So you can go and say here, whenever I load this component, we say unload. So this here is our event, just like we did that little click thing that I kind of skipped over pretty quickly because it wasn't really intended to be part of the presentation. So just like I did there, I can go and say, whenever I load, I can run this workflow. And the first step of this workflow should be a loop. Loop. Nope. Repeat. Wait, what do you call it?
Do it again.
Interval. Sorry, we just added this one. I forgot what we called it. Interval. So I can say, let's say every, 3,000 milliseconds, this is going to tick. So it's going to sit there going every 3 seconds going now. And it's going to run a workflow every 3 seconds. And inside this workflow, I can say call events. Now, because Discord is extremely not happy about people spamming the API, I'm not going to do that because they are not they're not particularly liberal with how many requests you get to make to them. So I won't add that this time, but that you can do that as an easy way of solving that problem. Right?
Cool, thanks.
So now I have one paragraph. I can hold down Alt and copy that to get another one. And number 2 here, I actually want, instead of using name, I'm going to use, let's say, description. And we can just go and maybe change the styling on this paragraph a little bit. Let's set the size to large and the color. Oh, let's do that here. We're going to set that to be a little bit brighter. Maybe add a little bit of margin just between them, right? And actually, maybe I'll add, just set this to full height there. And we'll set a little bit of a background on this to make it a little bit higher contrast. Yeah. And lastly, I want to add an image because we have a nice header image for each of these. So I can go and add an image here. And then inside this image, you have these attributes. And again, IMG again, everything is because we're sticking very close to HTML. This means the first time you try Toddle, it might look a little bit different, and you kind of have to get a little bit used to that. But there's a massive benefit in that you know exactly what the browser actually does when your application runs. And you can go and pick up any other tool, including Webflow, similar, and you know exactly how it works because it's fundamentally the same thing.
I love that learning. I love that learning opportunity. You know, as you build, you get to learn about HTML. That's cool.
And the kind of same thing is true with CSS. Obviously, it's a little bit less clear because it's an interface, but all the properties and layout we have here, the layout algorithms, everything is the ones that are built into the browser. They're very, very powerful and lets you do exactly what you want. So we've adopted all of that, right? But you don't need to go and study what does that mean. You don't need to know that there's a property called object fit to figure out what that might possibly do. Toddle helps you by having a very nice to use interface. Right? But so for images, the way we set the actual image is through this source attribute. And so now there's a little bit of an issue here coming from Discord, because instead of providing us with the URL for the image, they just give you the ID of the image inside their system. So you kind of have to construct the URL. And I didn't really want to sit and do that on stream because I felt like that was a bit unnecessary. So I created a formula that would actually do that for me. And I can just pass that in here. I can show the formula, but essentially what happens here now is that it'll build up this header image. Let's just add a little bit of margin to the top to make it all look nice. And now we can see we have obviously today, right now, our build and ship your web apps faster than ever before event. And here in Copenhagen, Denmark, we actually have a no-code meetup later this month as well. So that's the second event in our Discord. And these are events that we've created inside our Discord server and shared with the community. And now we can actually go and use them and grab them out to use them on our website if we want to do that as well. I promised you to show the formula. So what this does is that basically says, hey, you should pass in an event to this formula. And it'll just concatenate all this data together, saying, here's the base URL that Discord just, and I just grabbed this all out from Discord's website to figure out how this worked. It needs to have the event ID from the event, and then a slash, and then the event image. I put in some filler data here. So it's 9 out of 10 times when you work with an API, they're kind enough to add URLs to images. Every now and then, you're not so lucky. But one of the nice things about Toddle is that even when you're working with an API that doesn't really feel like it want to play ball, there's still a way to get to where you want, right? It's flexible enough, so whatever it is the problem you have, you can go and achieve that. You can make it happen.
That's super cool. And so this component that you just created, you can just like copy paste and use for any website that you're building, or
yeah.
So it saves obviously in a sort of library.
Yeah, so obviously I can go now to my homepage in this case, where I added, let's just get rid of this. And I can go and in here insert my new Toddle events component. and I still have to click the title to fetch the data. And then now I can reuse this event as many times as I want, anywhere I want inside my Toddle app. But I can also, when I double click, I just navigate to that. I can also go down here to sharing and actually get this little embed code. And if I copy this, I can paste that into anywhere where I can embed HTML code. So Webflow, Framer lets you do this,
anything.
Notion, pretty much anywhere that supports that. We did it with Card as well. Is a really good case because Card's like really easy to get started, but there's not much functionality. But if you then want that one thing on your landing page that draws attention, you can go and use Toddle to embed code right there.
That's super cool. That's amazing. And it was super fast, fairly easy, and super intuitive, which is what I like the most about this application. Awesome. Did you want to share anything else, or?
Well, so I think one of the things that we often tell people, and we have it right on our website, is that we use Toddle ourselves every day because we build Toddle and Toddle. And generally, when I say that, you have to say it a few times before people are entirely on board with what on earth does that actually mean to build Toddle and Toddle. Right? So I'm just going to go and open the base app here. So what it means is that everything you've seen today, including the app we're building, but also the app, like the app itself, is a Toddle application built in Toddle. So I can open my Toddle project here, which is the one our team is always working in. And we are still a little bit suffering under some some Cloudflare issues.
Could have been worse. Could have been worse.
It could have been worse. It could also have been better. So the first thing we're going to load here is just our website. There we go. And so this obviously our website itself is built in Toddle. Toddle isn't really the optimal tool for building, like it's very capable of building landing pages, but so are so many other tools. But obviously, since we are Toddle, we're going to choose our own tool to build our website, right? Our documentation and blog is also built in Toddle. But actually also, if you go to here, the whole editor, so everything you're looking at, this is always a nice view. So you have your left panel here with all the elements. This is, yeah, there we go. So the left panel here where we navigate is actually this bit right here, this component right here. Right. I can double click on that and have a little bit of a closer look.
I like the loading.
Maybe this means that Cloudflare is resolving the issues now. Yeah, maybe this means that Cloudflare is resolving the issues now. If we're lucky.
We'll see.
Okay.
But we're keeping it real, just like I wrote in the
chat.
You
know, it's a proper live demo.
Exactly. And outages are real. If you're building anything, you're going to come across them. And so it's good to see how companies deal with them.
Yeah. I will say, in defense of Cloudflare, it is one of the most reliable companies on the whole internet. Unfortunately, the last 2 days have not been the best. But so, yeah, here we can see this panel out here. You can see it's the same one we have here. And so every part of the editor you've seen today, everything from the editor view here, the node view, our component data on the right, you can see this is a slightly more complicated setup than what I was demoing before. Everything in the editor is also a Toddle application built in Toddle. And this sort of allows us every single day, like if something is not working the way it should, if something is not as good as it should be, we're usually the first one to notice it, right? Because we spend an enormous amount of time in our own software trying to make it as good as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's I love that. I love that everything is in-house and kind of aids speed and just creating like this custom, this very clean code. It's really cool. again, much respect to that. And awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andreas. Would you like to open the Q&A? I see there's a lot of questions in the chat. And
I
you
think
tell
that's
me.
a good idea.
All right, let's do that. And let me just get your screen out of the way, so it's just me and you. Awesome, cool. And obviously, as per usual, it's an interactive event, so if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. I can see already there's a few there, and I'm going to prioritize our community, of course. So I'm going to read these questions first, and then if we're running out of questions, I have a whole form that you have also submitted with all the other questions. So let me scroll back. Let's see. Going back to the first question from Tyler, who's been a fan today. So thank you so much for watching us, Tyler. I know that you've been interested into checking out Toddle for a while, so I hope you're enjoying today's event. So here's his question. Do you have an Eventbrite integration? I've been fighting that API hard for a while.
So we don't have a specific custom integration for Eventbrite, but our API connector works with any API pretty much. We haven't found anything yet that it wouldn't work with, and I mean, I don't see any reason why we would. So you can absolutely use Toddle with Eventbrite. I would say if the problem you're having is that their API is difficult to work with, we probably can't help too much with that. So we don't have any custom integration set up for that. What you could do is the same trick I did today, because I'm sure that Discord has an API. I haven't checked it out. I just decided to use Make instead because I knew that was going to save me a ton of time. So I know Make has like, I think it's 1,600 or something like that now integrations. I think there's a good chance Eventbrite is among them. So that might be a good way to sort of get off the ground a little bit faster.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Another API question. I know that APIs are such a big topic in our community, and I knew this would come. How are APIs managed across different pages in Toddle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So each page, or actually each component, which can even be a part of a page, manages their own APIs. So they're responsible for their own data fetching. And this is actually quite important because you don't necessarily want different components interacting with each other, right? So each of them kind of are responsible for fetching their own data. There are cases where you want to have multiple parts of your page using the same data. And there you can sort of have one component at the top manage the data fetching and then have multiple components accessing that through what we call attributes, which is how you can pass data between components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Good question. Another API question from Jason. Hi, Jason. I think this is referred to when you were using Make to connect with Discord. Why can we just call the Discord API from Toddle directly?
I think you probably can. I know it's not going to be as fast as doing it through Make on a live stream. So that's pretty much it. I think that the one thing that might also potentially add to that is that since Toddle is for the I mean, that's the reason why I did it today, right? It's just because it's much easier to do it through Make. I don't have to go and read that API documentation and figure out how Discords work. But the other bit is that Discord most likely would want you to provide an API key, and that API key might not be something you want publicly available. So in that case, you could set it to only be allowed to read, and then it's probably fine. You can manage permissions for that, but if you don't want people to access that API key, you shouldn't add it inside Toddle because that is going to be loaded into the browser, and your users will be able to access that if they're capable to inspecting the application.
Cool. All right. API inception, says Tyler. Absolutely. Dimitri is watching from LinkedIn. Hi, Dimitris. Could we use Toddle to generate landing pages, including SEO settings for the page?
Yes. I mean, obviously, depending entirely of what version of generating is meant here, because there's kind of two levels of that. The first one is just basically being able to create a application with a lot of dynamic pages, and Toddle handles that really well. Everything you can do in Toddle pretty much can also be done in a dynamic way, whether it's based on data. So that means you could fetch data from an API and use some of that data as the title for the page, both as a heading, but also as the meta title for SEO and description. This is all handled server side. So we render the whole page on the server, including the API call, assuming it's done on a page. So that even if the service you use isn't running JavaScript to index your page, you'll still get the fully rendered result. Now, the next level of that is you could also build a no-code tool for generating landing pages in Toddle. But I think it probably was the first one you meant. But you could also actually generate landing pages to run as a separate application, right? Because I mean, we build a no-code in Toddle. Other people can do the same. Right? We don't have access to anything that's not available to any other user. Right?
I was thinking maybe if we have some time, we can do a quick showcase of some applications that have been built in Toddle. That'd be cool to watch. I read in your Discord that your goals for Toddle is for it to be a framework like React. That's a lofty goal. Is there anything you can add to that?
No, I think to some degree, yes. I think it is. I mean, obviously, React, there's a lot of difference in between Toddle and React. Toddle being a code framework and only being part of building a web app. Toddle is kind of the full solution of you build everything in Toddle, right? So I think maybe what I tried to say at least was that that's kind of where we see ourselves in the market. As no code grows, I think the next generation of people building in no code, a lot of them are going to come from the code world, because those are the companies that's going to start seeing the benefit of not using code to ship products, but actually using a no code tool. So we had a goal that Toddle could do anything React can do, but it can already do that. So that's not really much of a goal anymore. Now the next bit is to get it to that level of adoption. That's probably going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, that's why it's important to come to these sort of events and connect with communities like ours to spread the word. And I hope that I'm doing a good job at it, because literally every person that I know, and they talk to me about Bubble, I'm like, oh, have you checked Toddle? So yeah, a big fan. Alrighty, I think we're done with questions from the chat. People that are watching, do ask any other questions you might have. Drop them in the chat if you would like to keep interacting with us. And I'm just gonna put up the form with some more questions that we had from our audience over there. Let me see. Let me check if we have something that we haven't tackled yet. Tom Ireland says, how did I only just find out about this? So I think you need to do something on your marketing team, Andreas.
Well, I will say that Tom Ireland did not just figure out about this. Tom Ireland is one of our most active Discord users, and he is on there every day. So if you want to try Toddle out, go and join our Discord channel. We'll try to answer questions quicker than Tom Ireland, but we're not always succeeding. He is very much a gift, and we are very, very happy that he's chosen to put so much time and effort into helping us out. Yeah,
amazing.
And I mean, the short answer to why you just found out of it is that we haven't really been live for so long. We launched in June this year, so it's been a long time on the way. I spent a long time building on Toddle to get it to where it is now, but we only just launched this year, so it is quite a new tool still.
It's quite fresh. I was gonna say, the shiny object syndrome. To me, this is not just like, doesn't belong to the category, but it's absolutely shiny. It's a fairly new tool, but absolutely shiny. Let's see. This is an interesting question for people that might have not heard about Toddle before. So from Ijaz, what's the best place to start learning Toddle?
So I think the very best first step is just to go sign up for a free account. When you create a new project, you can see this tutorial project we've created. I definitely recommend getting started there. It's a project built in Toddle that also takes you through how to build projects in Toddle. Like with so many things, it sounds a little bit difficult when you say it, but it's actually quite easy when you get started. But it sort of takes you through how the editor works, how the different parts of Toddle, the core components are structured, and what they're doing, right? And after that, I would say definitely join our Discord when you have questions. There are people there all the time. We are all there all the time, but also a very great community that's being really helpful. And then we have a ton of videos on YouTube showing us building all sorts of things.
Awesome. Here's another question from who was this? Donald Cox. How can you use an existing design system with Toddle?
Oh, that's a good question. So that is possible because there's actually not a lot of things that's not possible in Toddle. We very much build it on this premise that almost no matter what you need to achieve, you can do that. Like, we're not stopping you from doing it. There are some times when we advise against it. So you can like Toddle supports you setting up themes. I didn't show that today because there's, I can't show everything, unfortunately, but you can go and configure the theme, set up your design system there, put in your brand colors, all the right spacing, the right fonts you want to use. So you can do all that. And if you have an existing ones, if you want to go a step further and use a React component library, that's possible. I mean, you can go and introduce that into Toddle. I would generally recommend against it because Toddle is not built in React, so you're adding a lot more overhead. There are a few design systems that are built based on native web components. They work very, very well with Toddle, and you can more or less copy-paste them directly into the app and use them. But I would still mostly recommend building your content in Toddle. And the last thing I want to add...
Yeah, sorry, you go ahead.
I would say the last thing I want to add is that we're working with a Danish design firm right now called Qualifik for them to build a design system for Toddle. The plan is that it doesn't become the design system for Toddle, but a design system for Toddle. So we want to go and work with more of these design houses to build, so there's a variety. You can go and pick what is the best one for your project. I don't have a deadline for this to come out, but it should come out a little bit later this year. So people can start using their awesome design system to get up and running with new applications.
Yeah, that's cool. And I was just saying that if you check out the website that I just shared in the chat, toddle.dev, it's really cool that there's a sort of interactive interface already in the website on the landing page. You can play around with the with Toddle itself, I guess, because you can click things and you can see how they react, which it's fun and it's cool. Awesome. Yeah. There is a question going back to you're aiming for Toddle to kind of break all the barriers, be able to do anything possible. But you were also saying earlier on that sometimes you've had to talk people out of it. And so it goes well with this question from Sco Digital again. Is there actually anything that's impossible in Toddle? Or I would love to know, what are those cases where you had to talk people out of it?
There are a few things that are not possible yet, and then there are a few things that are not possible. We don't have particularly good support for PWAs yet. That's kind of the only thing where I really say there's a hard blocker. So if you need a web app that's offline first, which, if I'm honest, is a very, very small percentage of web apps that are. But if that's something you're looking for, we're not quite supporting that yet. Other than that, really the browser is the main limitation. We built Toddle in a way that if the way we sort of recommend you to do something, and the standard practice of how you build in Toddle, it's very closely modeled on, for example, how React does it. And we have kind of some of the same limitations. There's a part where this sort of way of doing it doesn't necessarily fit a use case, but then it's very easy to opt out. And what we're basically saying, we can add a custom action. You can write something in code, add it into Toddle, and then reuse this action everywhere in the code. So there's always a way of getting to that, like solving your problem. Occasionally it means sort of bypassing the way Toddle does thing a little bit, and this is exactly the same thing that the major JS frameworks have been doing for the last little over a decade, right? And it's a very small percent of time, but that's even relevant. Like you'll probably build a few apps before you run into one, right?
Brilliant. Well, Andreas, I guess that is all for today. I'm gonna leave you with one last question from me. Where do you see Toddle 1 year from now?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that we will start focusing a lot on collaboration, hopefully, both within teams, but also we are actually already starting that, but also within the community. So the next big thing we're going to release is our sharing sort of community feature, which is basically if you build something in Toddle, whether it's a design system like Qualifix is doing, or whether it's just a simple component, or whether it's pretty much whatever it is, like a QR code scanner component that other people can use. You can share that with the community. We're going to have a whole platform where you can search through what other people have built. You can store that directly into your application. So that's going to be the next big thing coming out for Toddle. And we are very lucky with the community we have. I'm sure they're going to embrace this quite a lot and start building a lot of cool stuff that you can just directly import to your project and get started.
I think that's brilliant. From a community person, I've seen that quite a lot in these kind of tools, and it definitely fuels the community, and it's a great opportunity, a growth opportunity for both the tool and the people that are using it. So fantastic. Well, all the best to you and Toddle. As you know, big fan here. I'm also in your Discord, and I'll be here watching it grow and expand every year more. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you for being a part of the NoCodeOps community as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
All right, and people, if you do want to connect with Andreas, let me share your LinkedIn. So because I know that we had a lot of interest around this event today. So I'm just going to share your profile. And if you have any more questions, reach out to me or connect with Andreas, and we'll make sure you get those answers. All right. So you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see everyone in our Discord or Discords. And I'll see you next week for the next episode. All right. Bye, everyone.